Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Powering Progress. And this is where we look at the different ways, approaches we can take to power the progress of underrepresented talent and really make a difference to create inclusive working environments. The guest I have today, so excited to speak with. I met this person in kind of such interesting circumstances, and we were in a little chapel, just a few of us, telling stories about our life, and Daniele's story was so powerful that even now, if I talk about it too much, the emotions are going to come up. But since then, we formed a real bond and friendship, and the work we do is very similar. So it's a real pleasure to have Daniele here today. Welcome, Daniele, and I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, mate. And it is a real honor, and you have become a friend from that one moment of us sitting there trying to tell our stories, and I know your business, but yeah, whenever I always just remember your story around Stevie Wonder and the impact that's had on you, and it's just amazing just to always have that connection. So I'm Daniele Fiandaca. I basically founded something called Take Command 10 years ago, which was specifically to help men get better engaged with inclusion, equity, and diversity. I now run a consultancy called Take Command Consulting as alongside that. And I focus on two things really. One is inclusive leadership. So I work with senior leadership teams. And the second thing is really engaging men with inclusion and diversity. So I do that through supporting men, recognizing that men need support too. But also I do that in supporting them, actually inspiring them, and then recruiting them to become better allies and agents of change, because we can't power progress without changing the cultures in which we work.
Yeah, definitely. So it is great to have you here, and I believe your lens on this topic and this area is so important to the conversation. First thing, love to hear your thoughts on. Well, what does powering progress of underrepresented talent actually mean to you?
Well, I think if anyone's ever seen the image of equality and equity, right, where you got the fence, and then people have different heights. For me, the heights represent privilege, and so what I know is that I have so many privileges. And I go back to 12 years ago when I first started Toe Command. That was the first time I really started to my kind of what eyes were open to the privilege I have. And I think often people think privilege is what you have. But actually, when we look at the workplace, I would argue that privilege is what you don't have. So what I haven't had in my career is I haven't had the same barriers that underrepresented talent has. It's been easy for me as a white, straight, neurotypical cisgender man without disabilities, and so for me, if I go back to that image, you've got the three people, the one person who can't see over the fence, and then that's equality, right? And then equity is, giving people giving different support. So recognize the underrepresented talent needs support. The first element is equity, right? Is understanding what additional support people might need. I'm going to give you a very simple example, but for someone from a lower socioeconomic background, often if you've got a London-based job, even asking them to come into London for an interview, often they just want you to have the money for that. And that might be a difficulty for them if they're doing 5 interviews. So just paying for people's travel time for interviews makes a big difference. Having a signing on bonus for many people makes a big difference. So understanding that element of it. And so equity is one thing, is what additional support can you give people? And that includes training, that includes so many different things, but also recognizing there's a fence. So that fence represents the barriers that currently exist to people just having the same opportunity, same outcomes from the same opportunities. And so what we also need to do is we need to lower that fence. So we have to get rid of the barriers that currently exist. And that means culture change. We have to change the culture. If I look at most of the clients I work with, they have masculine cultures, they have white cultures, they have ableist cultures, they have cultures designed for neurotypical people. So all those people those cultures aren't designed for from the outset means they will have ongoing barriers. And so what we need to do is change those cultures.
Yeah, no, it's such a great point, and I love that image that you're talking about. and how we can get rid of the barriers, even lower the barriers. Because to your point as well, sometimes we can spend so much time on focusing on the support, which is good, but in reality, we don't know what that support always looks like. We don't always have the time. The bias is there even to even know how do we give that support. But if you get rid of those barriers in the first place, it becomes less about the support. It's like, here you go out and progress in your own way, using your own skills and capabilities. And I think that's a really powerful image. I think most people should just have that up on their wall.
I know.
Say, like, are there barriers here? What do we need to do to lower those barriers or just demolish those barriers in the first place, really?
So just a couple of things. So firstly, yes, put it on the wall, but I want to redesign it because firstly, I've used it for for 7 years, and I've realised that actually it also caused slight harm in that the person with the most privilege in the right hand side doesn't have a box. So that suggests that person doesn't need support. That's just not true, right? So I think we need to recognize everyone needs boxes.
Yeah.
And my contention is I think the EDI industry still has done some amazing work, but I think it's still getting it very wrong when it comes to engaging meaningfully with men. So people like me, yes, I have a lot of privilege, but I still need support. And often it doesn't give that support. But coming back to your point about the fence is when you don't actually solve the systemic issues. I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to say who it is. I don't want to break their confidence, but I know someone that works in the content industry, and she's a black woman, and her career accelerated after the murder of George Floyd. Did really, really well. Then obviously the writer's strike happened. We've seen content being pushed down. And what's now happened is she's just not getting hired at all. Because what's happening is those same people that were hiring her before, and now when you've got a restricted number of opportunities, they're now reverting back to their mates. They're reverting back to the people that were preferred in the system. And so all of a sudden you haven't changed the system. So when it goes smaller, she then loses those opportunities despite being a brilliant director, right? And so the reality is if you don't make that change, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, and links to what we're trying to do here. This is not about just a quick jump or quick wins for underrepresented talent. This is ultimately the conversation around how do we change the structure? How do we change the system to show real progression? Because, like you say, real progression isn't I got a few opportunities and jobs and now I'm back to square one. This is about what we're saying, what we're doing, what we're noticing, how we're acting, and from your kind of vantage point, what are some of the things you're seeing? What are some of the things you're noticing in relation to this conversation around underrepresented talent?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be more positive, if I'm honest. But I do speak to a lot of the underrepresented talent, and they're still very frustrated with the speed of change, and I'm not surprised. I do think I know I do inclusive leadership programs. I work on as a coach, and my main observation is this is a big one, but I do believe and I will say most, I think most CEOs are playing lip service to this topic without realizing they're playing lip service to it. And what I mean by that is they're just not understanding how much the culture needs to change. They're not totally understanding how much they need to change. So if I look at my inclusive leadership work, it's only through becoming a coach and working more closely with men have I added, in terms of inclusive leadership. So self-awareness is one of the key things we look at now, because I think a lot of leaders just don't have that self-awareness. And when I say self-awareness, I'm talking about the awareness of how people view you and what impacts you have on them, but also how your behavior may detrimentally impact them, and also the self-awareness of the system that you operate within. And I still don't think people are culturally aware enough to truly understand just what the experience of being underrepresented talent actually looks like. And so for me, Even though I don't like the term reverse mentoring, I prefer co-mentoring. But I have seen some real benefit through that ability for senior leaders to learn
Yeah.
from that underrepresented talent of what it really feels like, so they can get a real empathy and a real understanding. The reason I don't like reverse mentoring is often it feels like all the value yet again is going for that underrepresented talent to that senior leader. In I actually For a reverse mentoring scheme, I actually try and do it so it's reverse mentoring, but then the leader then sponsors that talent.
Yeah.
Right. So that leader takes responsibility for actually helping that talent to accelerate through their career.
Yeah, definitely. I look at it very much in that way around mutual mentoring, we call it, because you're right, value comes from both sides. And even that
Yeah.
mindset of you're the leader, you're at the top, you've got the knowledge, you've got the insight, you're the gatekeeper, so you pass it down. Or the other way is I need to give this to you to make things work. And actually it should be that two-way connection, and
Yeah.
it builds confidence. And even one of the sessions we're mutual mentoring program, so we're doing at the moment, part of the work was just getting the aspiring leaders to know that you have value. This is not
Yeah.
you just coming to get. And of course, there's barriers in the way for you, but also a big part of this is knowing that you have value, you have something to offer. And if you can show that, if you have the confidence to do that, that's going to help you on this journey to partner with these senior leaders and them to see, well, actually, I need to bring you along to these conversations that you're not being
100%.
privy to those rooms. So yeah, really, really powerful. How do you feel? Or even what's getting in the way for senior leaders to just say, look, this is what I need to do. This is what I can do. Let me just go and do it. What's stopping them?
So I'm gonna say I don't want to say time because it's never about time, it's about prioritization. So for me, it's something's just getting in the way for them. So one is ignorance, right? They don't understand often just how difficult it is to be. So going back to why started Token Man is because I was at a dinner with 12 women, and all of a sudden I was in the out group, right? And it took until I was 39 to be in the out group at work for the first time.
Mm,
you know and so for someone that's comes from an underrepresented group, or women, they're just looking at that and going, that was my first day in work, right? I was in the out group from the start. So I think firstly is it's getting that understanding, spending the time to do it, and actually building that culture intelligence. And so what we need to do is to get people to feel it. Actually, I think a lot of the challenges that we're having with businesses, the way they execute, is they don't invest in it properly. They don't train people up. They just they make policy change, they make process change. They might put in a rule which says we need one underrepresented talent on any shortlist. But if they don't then explain why and get people to feel why,
mm,
these people then just go, well, I'm putting it becomes tokenism, right? It becomes a token. They don't understand it. They're not understanding actually that there's a reason why you're doing that, and that's because diverse teams lead to better results.
yeah,
And so if you don't have diversity in your team, I would argue, quite, if you're a senior leader and you don't have diversity in your team, you're just not doing the best job you can be. Yeah, you can be a better team by bringing different experiences and different viewpoints, and that's where you get the real richness.
yeah. Going back to that moment when you talked about being a, because it's fascinating, because obviously as a black person, I've been in organizations where I've looked around and everyone is white, and there is
I know.
there is a feeling around like this is strange. I've also been in a room where I've been in the only man and women, and that same feeling of this is really strange as well. So the intersectionality of this as
Yeah,
well
yeah, yeah.
in different groups and different rooms, you are aware of it. But going back to that point when at 39 you're the only man in a room with women, what did that kind of feeling do for you and kind of resultant steps and actions?
Well, the first thing is when I walked into the room, And you know me, Lanray, you know me quite well. And so you probably say this is not possible. And certainly my friends will say it's not possible. But something happened, which is I lost my confidence.
Mm,
And that never really happened to me before in my workplace, or that, and so all of a sudden, unless we all get, the reality is we all get imposter syndrome in some way. But when everyone looks like you, it's much easier to step over that, right? And actually move beyond that. And so when you're the only person in the room, that imposter syndrome just goes through the roof, and it just becomes hard. And so all of a sudden, my confidence went. The conversations that happen around me seem to just push me further away.
mm,
And then when I got up to speak, I got cut off from my good friend who was co-hosting it from it and they were all things I'd heard women experiencing in the boardroom or in senior leadership. And it's not that I didn't believe them, I just didn't understand the extent of what it felt like in the out group. But also I hadn't that forced me to think about my own behaviors and how I was maybe excluding. And it sounds a really trite example, but it's actually one of the examples that come up so much when I speak to women. But, on a Tuesday morning, we had a senior leadership team at the time of 10 men and 2 women. On a Tuesday morning, we had a management meeting. The first thing I'd always do is I'd see Pete. He's a big Liverpool fan. I'm a big Arsenal fan. We'll talk about football.
mm,
In that particular scenario, I know those 2 women weren't interested in football. So I started to realize that I was straight away starting with a conversation that pushed them further away.
yeah,
So I stopped doing that from that day, right? I stopped doing it. Don't get me wrong, if those 2 women were football fans, 100% I would continue because actually that would pull them in. But understanding your conversations and what those conversations look like. And I remember a colleague of mine talking about being an advertising agency, and this is a black guy, and he talked about even at lunchtime when they went out for lunchtime, they would be talking about Bridgerton, and it just wasn't in his stable of what he listened to. It wasn't his passion project. He just came from a different, what he interacted with,
yeah,
but he kind of felt really left out because
yeah,
he was just in a different space. And so having those kind of common touch points and things that you can talk about is really, really important in the workplace.
yeah,
And so we have to all be more open, and we can't listen, we see so often that people have to assimilate. I've even seen with men, men who don't like football, who I know. I spoke to one senior leader who's a finance director. He used to look at the results on Sunday night just so that he could pretend he was a football fan so that he could fit in.
yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting as well because sometimes when we talk about this topic around creating change and being more inclusive, that we're always thinking about we need these big strategies and these frameworks and policies and plans, which are important, but at the same time, there are these things that we can do just how we talk to people, being aware of the subject matter, interest, person to person. I believe connection and relationship is so important. And part of the issue is, and when we talk about underrepresented talent, whatever demographic you might be, is that there's a lack of connection between those who are underrepresented and the majority groups. And I'd love to hear your view working with token man and the focus on men, where we know predominantly when we look at senior leadership groups, they are white men. How do we plug that gap that is clearly still there between senior leadership and further down the organization?
How do we play that? First, I'll go back to the point that I talked about before, which is we've got to stop demonizing men. Is the first thing. So I wasn't a bad person 11 years ago, but I wasn't an inclusive leader. Now that's the reality of it. I wanted to do good, and I think it was my God, why have I forgotten her name? Maya, what's her name? Oh my God. She said, you know as much as you know, and then you do as well as you can do, but then you know more than you do better. Um, for me, that's the reality. So if I had an unlimited time and a budget, I would just stop. But this office is not going to happen. But if
Mm,
I could just 1 week of the year take all the staff and actually take them through training every year, not just training, but connection, meeting each other, understanding barriers, I don't think EDI would have to do any other work, because what would happen is the people themselves would work out what needs to change.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's all about connection. Uh, I think it's all about understanding and that culture intelligence and feeling. And I think, and so when it comes to when I work with men, what we have created is unfortunately, we have created an environment where men are scared to speak up.
Mm.
It's the number two biggest barrier for people becoming male allies,
What are they scared of?
saying the wrong thing. You know, people, I see it sometimes that a man will say the wrong thing. He would say something really ignorant, right? I saw a senior leader talked about women and their need to speak up more about pay rises, right? And it was not understanding the issue, it was not understanding the problem, but he got absolutely slaughtered for it in the press. And there was loads of people celebrating that this guy got slaughtered for it. And I was doing the opposite. I went, do you know what? You've just stopped anyone actually speaking full stop about this stuff. So if
Mm.
you're a CEO now, you're just not going to talk about any of this stuff, right? Because you know that the negative PR is just too much. And I see it. I mean, I've gone into some organizations and I'm running a panel and they've said, oh, I'm not. And you see, it's what we call politics, political answers. They don't actually answer the
Mm.
truth. So what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of men. So if you look at something like Me Too, for example, one of the consequences of Me Too is we know through Lean In has done some studies around this, is men are less likely to be mentors to women.
Mm.
Yeah. Some men, I actually worked with a client the other day and they actually told me a story, which is they're very heavily, very male dominated business. And someone on the shop floor had never spoken to the woman on the shop floor. There's only one woman in this factory, and he'd never spoken to her. So I said, "Why? I don't know what to say. What do I say to her?" And they just said, "Just speak to her like a human being."
Mm.
But he was just so scared. I don't know. I don't know why. He was so scared to even say anything. And so I run Brave Spaces. I run for clients, which obviously they pay me for, but I also do lots of free Brave Spaces, which is about, and again, this has come back to your answer of how do we get more men um, supporting underrepresented talent, is we get them more comfortable with having uncomfortable
Mm.
conversations, more comfortable in going to their junior talent, the junior black woman who's joined the business, actually saying, what's it, well, what are your challenges, what's it like, and actually those people feeling comfortable that person is going to listen to understand, not listen to reply or listen to defend, but actually going to seriously listen and go, okay, and ask questions like, what can I do differently? What have I, tell me what I've done that's maybe make you, what kind of microaggressions have you experienced for me or the rest of the team? What can we do differently? And do that without being defensive.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the answer is, the reason I work with men is because I create that space. But also I think, it's not lost on me that I've been relatively, I'm going to say relatively, because at the moment it's not so rosy, but I've been in the space for 7 years, and until now, the space has treated me very well, and I've done very well in the space, and the irony is not lost on me that I've done well as a white, straight, cisgender, neurotypical man without disabilities. But my superpower is, there's no doubt, my superpower is speaking to men that are like me and have
Yeah.
experiences like me. Because often one of the other barriers is they will see people that are different to them, who I won't have their lived experience,
Yeah.
so they won't really understand what it's like to be a white straight man.
Mm.
They won't understand that, what it's like to have been in the in group the whole time is you haven't had to have uncomfortable conversations. Yeah, brilliant, that's a privilege. But if all of a sudden you put me in an uncomfortable conversation, I don't have the tools, or I'm not equipped to actually cope with that. Um, but also they'll see someone that does that, it isn't to their benefit. These conversations aren't to their benefit. I'm not. when I speak about supporting women and other historically marginalized groups, that's not, I say it's not benefiting me. The reality is all the work I do, I believe, but benefits everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm able to talk to them about why the man box, for example, harms all men.
Mm,
Yeah, why the current system harms, I say all men, most men. Okay, we are seeing in the States some of those super privileged men fighting back because they like the system. The system works for them.
yeah,
But actually, for most of us, most of us mere mortal, the system creates huge harm. We
yeah.
just need to look at male suicide rates to see that.
And that's the point. It's so easy to have this stereotype of where men are, who men are, how they benefit. Then even as you said, the male suicide rates, for example, that the mental health challenges, and realizing that men are so important within this conversation. And what you were saying about being able to open up and share, it is really key. And vulnerability is a real key part of that. I was running a training session or a sharing circle um, yesterday, and what was really powerful to see, well, you did have a white senior male in there, along with other individuals from different groups, openly sharing, but starting from a place of vulnerability.
Mm.
And what I was observing was by them just opening up, sharing where they were had flaws and where they were struggling, and the topic was around anti-racism, and sharing their lack of knowledge or worries and how the role they play, it actually opened up a really powerful conversation, and you could see the building of the connection. And to be honest, one of the things that's always drawn me towards you is your openness and vulnerability to be able to share. And I feel the more as men we can do that and put ourselves in uncomfortable situations and not feel that you have to be the Superman or the one with all the answers, that really starts to break down some of these barriers. And what I'm hearing from you as well, that men aren't the problem, men need support as well, but by supporting men, it allows men to support others, and it we all
100%.
we all need to support each other basically.
100%. And
um,
also, and that's why my definition of male allyship isn't for women historically marginalized groups. My definition of allyship is for everyone, right? So we've got a definition that we use for our male coaching program, um, and in that program it does say women historically marginalized groups, but it also says those are struggling.
yeah.
So I want to be able to support men that look like me and be called an ally, whereas actually the traditional definition doesn't allow me to do that.
Mm,
That's ridiculous, and that does get in the way. So I think we have to re-look at this stuff and understand it. But I my I'm just so I feel really bad doing this because I don't have my nails painted. I tend to always have my nails painted. I'm the co-founder also of Hard as Nails, which is an initiative to get men to paint their nails to open up conversations around positive masculinity, healthy masculinity, I'd prefer to say, negative stereotypes, and male mental health. But the reason I don't have my nails painted is because I've been in delivery mode for 2 days, and I have made the decision. No one's asked me to take them off, but I've had made the decision to take them off because I know they represent a barrier for some people.
mm,
So some people will judge me and not listen to me because I've got my nails painting and the assumptions they are making.
mm,
Yes, that is their problem. That's not my problem. But my privilege is that I can take my nails off.
mm,
Yeah. I don't, once I take my nails off, they just see me as one of themselves. But not everyone has that privilege, right? Not everyone has that privilege with LGBTQ. As a black man, you don't have the privilege of going in and not being seen differently. And so I'm also conscious of that. But it still amazes me that the amount of outside, not at a personal level, but just at a societal level in the kind of in the social media space, which we know can be very toxic, but the amount of people who just feel, I don't know, they feel the amount of umbrage and anger at the fact that we're suggesting that men should even paint their nails, let alone it's for such a positive conversation,
mm,
but as if painting your nails makes you less of a man.
mm.
I mean, it's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But that's the reality. That's the reality that still exists. There still is, people's masculinity is fragile. Their sense of identity is so fragile that they actually feel emasculated by another man wearing nail polish.
Yeah, and I would say that part of this, it all links to this piece around how can we be more inclusive, how can we provide more support? Because if those in a position to make change are more worried about their identity, how they're seen, their voice,
Yeah.
how can they really step out and step up to support others who are facing different barriers, different challenges? And the reality is we can look at the hierarchy, we can look at society, that there are barriers. Yes, everyone needs help, but there are some in a position to use particular privilege to support others. And maybe that's not being done. Well, not maybe, it isn't being done as much as it should. And what support do you feel? And I'm asking you around the men, particularly because I know your expertise and the work you do around this. What support do men need that they're not having to help further underrepresented talent in the work we're trying to do?
So firstly, they need space and time. Yeah. So what I found, my experience is that when you get men, so I was running a workshop yesterday for a team lead, the men at our site, in about 2 hours from London. I'm not going to give away who the client was, but um, just having that space for 3 hours where it was only men. We're not going to come up with all solutions. It's not our job to come up with the solutions. We have to listen to the underrepresented talent to work out what the barriers are to come up with the solutions. But there's still a role for those men to really start navigating, start talking about what their responsibility is, what their privilege is. But in order to do that, I have to first talk about them and what their fears are and what their support is. And so that was, super powerful. I'm glad to say, the senior leader said, you're coming back in and we're going to go into the factory. We're going to get more men to do this because it opened up conversations they wouldn't have. So I'll give you a really good example. One of the follow-ups I'm going to set said, it's not about educating them, it's about actually opening up for society. That's my role as a coach. But the one follow-up I am going to say to them, one of the things that came up with was non-binary. Yeah, and they just didn't understand it. They didn't get it. And so I was able to give them, I don't tend to give content, but for things like that, I will talk about content. I will talk about why it's important. I will talk, when someone says, oh yeah, I'm happy accepting it, but why are they so loud about it? Why do they have to shout about it? And so just explaining to them the reason that someone gives you their pronouns as they, them, is just that they don't get misgendered.
Mm.
Yeah, because that can be really harmful. And, it happened today, actually. Someone that I was on a call, I've only just met them. We referred to them as she, and they just came on, just to let you know my pronouns are they, them. No need to apologize. I just want to let you know. But
Mm.
you don't want to have to do that every time. So that's why, so just explaining that and understanding why pronouns for them are important was important. Secondly, they were like, but that's all I can see in the news. I said, that's because you're seeing the activists. You're seeing the people that are opening the space up for the people that are having to deal with this um, transphobia, this
Mm.
phobia for change. And so that's what you're seeing. But a lot of people who are non-binary, they don't go around every day saying, talking about being that'd be really tiring. Who wants to go around and talk about their own identity the whole time? Often people would prefer just to be themselves and just go in and not have to worry about that stuff. But because this stuff is new and people are having to learn, they have to help educate. They have to go in it.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a really good example. We just had a really good conversation. It kind of went off piece, but we did talk about they, them, and we talked about non-binary, and we talked about the future of their business because there are so many people who are young, who are not identifying with the binary system. And we talked about, and then we just said why. And I said, because it causes so much harm.
Yeah. And it, as you talk, and the reason why we called this powering progress, we could have called this a number of things. We could have called it powering performance, powering careers, and really focus on tangible things. Yeah, you're progressing because you've gone from manager to senior manager, director, or you're now earning this salary, or but actually progress encapsulates so many different things.
Yeah, I love it.
And that
I love it.
progress could be, I used to every single day have to worry about how I'm going to be seen. Every day I'm thinking about my identity, or every single day I have to explain to someone about myself. And progress actually might be, I'm in an environment where I don't have to do that
Yeah,
because people accept me for who I am. I'm allowed to focus on what I want to do, be who I want to be. That is progress.
yeah.
And that is then going to come out in different ways, the relationships you have, the conversations you have, hopefully then in sort of the hierarchy as well. But what we want to do in this conversation is let people realize how vast and how broad progress is, and the role that we can all play to make even those changes that might be small, seem small to us, can be totally massive to someone else. And the pronoun example is just one example of that. Daniele, we are coming close to time.
Yeah, I know, I
We
know,
could talk
I know.
for ages. I'd love to. But as we wrap up, firstly, just any key pointers around working together, because I think a big thing around this is how we kind of work better together, different groups. So are there any key things? If we can do one or two key things, what would we say?
Yeah, 'cause I'm kind of imagining your audience underrepresented groups, and it's quite hard for me to say it, but I would, I suppose I would like, this is what I would like to see. Yeah, this is my observation. Is I I just, and this is my advantage because I'm never really advocating for me, right? I'm never advocating for me, but I am starting to advocate a bit more, right? So as I go on this journey, I'm now being tested for testosterone. It's low. I've probably experienced the andropause, and it probably explains why I've really struggled since COVID to have the same mojo as I had before. I know some people will say that's strange, but it really, I do feel it. I find it hard sometimes to get up and motivate myself, and maybe that's the andropause. So there is stuff I'm doing to advocate for white straight men, but often I've just advocated for others, right? That's what I've spent the last 7 years doing. And what I see a lot is I see a lot of people saying, this system is broken for me. Come and help me make it better for me. I would, if everyone that said that said this system is broken for us, let's work together to fix it, we would be in a much better place.
Yeah, definitely.
So if those people who I know on LinkedIn, for example, advocate and specialize in what it's like to be someone that's black, at the same time are advocating for showing us how the system harms LGBTQ people, harms disabled people. If we're all being better allies and showing how the system is broken rather than focusing on how it's broken for my group, I think we're going to be in a much better place.
Definitely. And the last question, thank you so much, Danny, is what does powering progress look like for you personally, the coming months, years?
I mean, I can't. It's creating workplaces that are truly inclusive. So for me, it's having those people. I want them to have the kind of conversation I had with them yesterday every day.
Cool. Fantastic. Love it. Well, we have come to the end. It has been a real pleasure. I'm sure those listening, those watching will take so much from hearing your insights, your stories, and hopefully it will ensure that they're continuing on the journey to power the progress for themselves and for others. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lanai.
Daniele. So we have come to the end. Hope you have enjoyed and look forward to connecting and seeing you on another episode. But for now, take care and keep powering your progress. Bye bye.